Let's hope this recording of this video goes a little bit better this time, because the other day, my mic was off the entire time while I was filming, so I filmed 2 videos with no sound. Well, I did it. I finished Wuthering Heights. I know I haven't really made a lot of updates, not as many as I thought I was gonna make about this book. I just kind of started getting rolling on it and didn't stop. I made a lot of short videos, so there are a lot of shorts about me talking about it and the movies and stuff. I just didn't make as many long form videos that I thought I was gonna make, but whatever, we're here now and we're gonna talk about it. Starting off, I will say the first 3 chapters, I was really worried I was not gonna get through. I thought, there's no way I'm gonna finish this book. This is way too hard to read. The first 3 chapters, if you don't know, are told from Mr. Lockwood's perspective, and then it goes on to Nellie, who works at Thrushcross Grange. Try saying that 10 times fast. Telling Mr. Lockwood the whole story about Wuthering Heights and the families that live there. The first 3 chapters, for some reason, were really hard to read. Maybe it was just because I was getting into reading that, like, the old English type of way of speaking that the characters speak in. But once you get to chapter 4, it like completely changes and it opens up and it just feels so much easier. Nellie's perspective is so much easier to read. And I feel like that's when you can really start like getting through it. So I will say, if you're stuck on the first 3 chapters, get to chapter 4 and it does get better from there. I really thought, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna get through this book. It was so hard in the beginning, but I did it, I got through it. It does help that I do have like an annotated version. It helps a little bit, but I will say not only Lockwood's perspective, but there is also a character in the book named Joseph, and he speaks and is written in a very like strong Yorkshire accent, which is very difficult to read. And once again, there are a lot of words and phrases that he says that people just don't say anymore, so it's very hard to understand. There is a website that translates a lot of that stuff. I find that it helps like a little bit, but it's still pretty difficult to understand. The other thing that's kind of amazing about this book when you first start reading it is you feel like so much of the story has been told all before like even the first half of the book is over. Even before the first 10 chapters are over, you're like, how is there still so much of the book left? And I feel like we've covered it all. Like it's honestly crazy like how complicated the story gets. You feel like by like here, you're like, there's no way there can be all of this left. It's like, I don't understand how we're gonna keep it going. But she manages to. I will say the second half is good, but there are moments where it feels like a little repetitive. Younger Kathy goes to see little like Linton Heathcliff a lot, and those parts drag a little bit, but it's okay because it is still just overall really good, interesting story. I think my favorite part about reading this is that it kind of feels like you're listening in on like 2 people gossiping, because Nellie is telling all of these years and years of family drama to Mr. Lockwood. So it kind of feels like you're like listening in on these like deep, dark stories, these deep, dark secrets about this family that like you really shouldn't be hearing. And I love how it's just like Nellie and Lockwood gossiping. I think that's what makes it also like so interesting, especially for when it was written in like the early 1800s. It really blows my mind that Emily Bronte wrote this in the 1800s and thought of this. This was her only piece of work, and unfortunately she would have no idea that this would go on to be such a hit and be still talked about all these years later and be made into movies over and over again. So it is crazy to think how this was her sole piece of work, but she would also never know what an impact it's made. Crazy and sad, but still amazing at the same time. I think it is also amazing how you can see the kind of author's lived experience through a lot of these older books. I read Frankenstein earlier this year, and it is kind of interesting when you learn about Mary Shelley's personal story and how much it really affected her stories and her writing, because Frankenstein in a lot of ways is a representation of Mary Shelley and what she had gone through in her life. And I think it's interesting to hear about Emily Bronte and her story and her sister's stories, and see like weirdly how much you can see it reflected in the stories. And I think that's so cool. Like in a subtle way, they put themselves in these characters, and I don't know, I think it's just really beautiful and well done and well written. It's so good. I also really like in this book that because Nellie is the storyteller and she is also a person within the story, there is still so much to be interpreted from people's actions, because Nellie at the end of the day doesn't really know what Heathcliff or Kathy or anybody was thinking. She can only speak from what she's been told or what she kind of assumed or based off of people's actions. She doesn't really know what's going on in certain people's minds. And it creates a kind of distance between you and the characters. And I feel like it just opens up this world in your mind of like, this book can really be interpreted so many different ways. People's actions in this book can be interpreted so many different ways. And I think that's also what makes it good. And I think makes the discourse too around like the newest movie so interesting. What I found is that like a lot of people really assume that Nellie is this very like honest storyteller. And I feel like that's really up for debate. Like she is biased. She was a part of the story. She probably has her own personal issues and whatever with the other people in the story. So obviously she's going to tell it from her perspective, and that is biased. And also like, because she is the character in the story, is she being fully honest with her actions within the story as well? But I just love the way that Emily Bronte wrote that. Is just, it leaves so much to be kind of imagined as to what were Kathy and Heathcliff doing on the moors all those times. What was Heathcliff doing when he left for years and years? And how did he get all that money? Did Nellie really know that Heathcliff was standing by the door and purposely let him hear what Kathy was saying and saying it would demean her to marry him? You know, like we don't really know because we're only kind of hearing a sliver of the information from somebody who I think a lot of people believe is a very reliable narrator, but she isn't at the end of the day. So there is really a lot to be interpreted from the story. I don't say that to say like Nellie's a bad or evil character, but I think like obviously, you know, there's that saying of like, there's your story, there's my story, and then there's the truth. And I think that's like Nellie is only telling her truth, her story, and like maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle of all of that. Like I'm sure if Heathcliff retold the story, it'd be completely different. But I do think that's also like what makes it so great is, like I said, there's so much to be kind of interpreted from the way this story is told. But yeah, I don't know what else to really say about the book. I really enjoyed reading it, even though it was very difficult at times. Now that I've finished it and I've moved on to a new book, it's very hard to kind of like move on mentally because I feel like this book just really sticks with you. And like I said, there's so much to be interpreted. So it's kind of like you just keep thinking about it and like, oh, was that really, you know, there's just so many questions like that kind of are unanswered. Like you almost have to just come up with your own theories as to why maybe certain characters' motivations were the way they were. But yeah, I feel like this book is just gonna stick with me for a really long time. But yeah, this is a hard one to move on from. It's so good. It's not it's hard because I'm like debating like, would I reread this? I don't know if I would reread this like necessarily this year. Maybe sometime in the future, I think it would be a good reread and to see like how your thoughts kind of change on it. It is also, like I said, kind of a hard read. So I don't know. I feel like it would take me like a few years maybe before I would like revisit the story, but it is so good. And I do highly recommend reading it if you haven't already. Or if you've seen the new movie and you're thinking about reading it, definitely do it. It is quite different than the movie, but I still think it's worth reading, obviously, and knowing like where the story came from and how it's been adapted into all these different stories, which I will make a video on all the movies because I went through and watched a lot of the movie versions of the book. So I'm going to talk about that soon. I also made, like I said, tons of shorts content. So look at my shorts and I talked about some of the movies as well as my Instagram. I posted stuff there about my thoughts. So follow me there. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.